This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 35. Welcome to the 35th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. If you've been enjoying the show, I would absolutely love it if you would take a moment and leave a review and rating on iTunes. It helps the show to move up in rankings so that more people can find it. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please stop by the blog and stop by the show notes page and leave a comment. I love hearing from you, and you'll find all the episodes at fertilityfriday.com/podcast. And you can also find me on Twitter at FertileFriday. And I've recently created the Fertility Friday Facebook group, so you can just go to fertilityfriday.com/community and you will be redirected to the group. So you'll have to make a request to join, which goes through me, and I'll approve you. The group is in the initial phases, and I hope that with time we'll be able to build a thriving and supportive community of like-minded women who will help each other in understanding and gaining confidence using the fertility awareness method. And so today, I'm so excited to welcome my guest, Aisha Mukoosa. Aisha has been using the fertility awareness method for almost 3 years now, and she, like most women who discover fertility awareness, myself included, had to share it and give other women the opportunity to learn about it as well. And so she decided to start a Facebook group, which, to her surprise, now has about 1,300 members. It's called the Fertility Awareness Method for Birth Control. And so in today's show, we'll be talking all about the fertility awareness method, what Aisha's experience has been like with it, and also what prompted her to start using FAM and start kind of taking action to get the word out a little bit more. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Aisha.
Thank you. Hey, everybody.
Thanks so much for being here. And so I'd love to start by just kind of maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about yourself and also how you first discovered fertility awareness.
Okay. My name is Aisha Mukoosa. I reside in Virginia, USA, and I'm originally from Uganda, East Africa. I came in America when I was 17, and I met my husband when I was 22, and we started out using condoms because I had learned about birth control options, and when I realized they were hormonal, I decided I am not gonna go that route even before I was sexually active. So I knew from right away it was gonna be condoms. So when I met my husband and that was his long-term birth control too, it was perfect. Exciting. So I didn't have to worry about that part at all. So we used condoms for 6 months, give or take a month, and everything was working fine. But he started to get some sort of allergic reactions to condoms. We tried different things, different condoms, position, everything didn't work out. So we had to find another option, and those were really hard months because all I knew was hormonal birth control, the copper IUD, and condoms. And if condoms were out of the picture, it was either hormonal birth control or the IUD. And I started doing research on the IUD, and the more I researched, the scarier it get. All I could see was a perforated uterus. I know when I was researching it, there were positive stories, but the negative ones, I could not ignore them. So I couldn't do it. And I had already decided never to do the hormonal route, and now I can't even do the copper IUD. So it was a dilemma. I was stressed. I was miserable, and we couldn't use condoms. So my husband told me, I had to go on the pill or something, and I, I started really thinking negative to a point where I really contemplated breaking up because it felt like it was my health or the relationship. So that's when I remembered withdrawal. I knew about withdrawal back home in Uganda. So I started digging, you know, the effective names, how to use it properly, because I was seriously trying to avoid pregnancy. Yeah, so I digged up perfect use and talked to my husband and yeah, the first time we did it, didn't work out. So I ended up taking plan B's. But anyway, the second time, yes, he did it in time. And he really liked it and it got more encouragement and it kind of made him trust it more. And that began another method of birth control for us. So then we started using withdrawal for birth control, but I knew that was going to be temporarily because he didn't see that as long time. I didn't mind withdrawing for life. I didn't mind, but he minded. So I was like, now what? Sooner or later, it will have to come back to hormonal birth control, which was horrific to me.
Since you're talking about withdrawal, I know I had Hannah Ransom on the podcast, and we talked all about withdrawal and how with perfect use it's 94% effective. And the interesting thing is that so many people don't even consider it to be a form of birth control. I mean, obviously, because if you don't withdraw in time, you're basically going unprotected. But with perfect use, so now after you and your now husband have mastered withdrawal, would you say that perfect use is possible? And maybe you could just talk a little bit about why you were confident in the method to begin with.
I was confident about withdrawal because I knew it worked. In high school, not in America, back home in Uganda, I used to hear people whisper about it. And then one time, a teacher, he used to tell us jokes in class. So one time he said, why don't people just withdraw if they're so scared about getting pregnant? That's what he does, and it works for him. So that was at the back of my mind. Before we discovered fertility awareness, it was supposed to be like temporarily birth control until we find something long term.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but when I started using Kindora, in the beginning, I didn't even know there was a stigma on withdrawal until people were sharing their chats and they had unprotected sex marked on peak days. And when you point it out, then you find out they use withdrawal, but they don't consider it as protected sex. I started telling people they need to start marking withdrawal as protected sex. And I found out apparently a lot of people use withdrawal for birth control, which I don't understand if they don't consider it protected. I still don't understand right now. And then when they talk about pre-ejaculation, I'm like, that's in the failure rate, Condoms have failure rate too, but nobody marked them unprotected because of that failure rate.
Well, I think it's so interesting because that's something that Hannah talked about too, because she said, you'd have couples who technically would say that they're not using birth control, but clearly they're not getting pregnant and they're using withdrawal. But
isn't that something?
Yeah, but it's kind of like a dirty word because withdrawal, it's not considered to be birth control. So if you were to go to your doctor or if you were to go to a health professional, for example, to discuss birth control options, they would not consider withdrawal to be birth control. Anything that falls within the control of the user, so anything that I am responsible for entirely. So even the diaphragm, if I have to put it in, it's just not really considered to be as effective. So there's definitely a bias towards the hormonal birth control because even condoms, medical health professionals will often discourage people from primarily and only relying on condoms. They'll often encourage people to use condoms and hormonal birth control as if condoms aren't an effective method of birth control, which is very interesting.
I see. I guess it all depends more on the typical users. Yeah, the typical users do all sorts of things. Yeah.
Well, and that's an
Not
interesting.
withdrawing all the time. I've talked to one. Yep, they used withdraw, but sometimes they don't withdraw.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't.
Yeah, and that's I guess what it comes. And I think it's really interesting conversation to have typical use versus perfect use, because perfect use isn't hard. Perfect use isn't difficult, but it really depends on your intention. So, before we get into how you first discovered fertility awareness, how
Mhm.
you mentioned that you really had a bias against hormonal birth control, and you had it from a young age. You knew that it wasn't something that was for you. So my question is,
Yes.
why was that? What about that concept of taking hormonal birth control made you really cautious of it even from the beginning?
Oh, when I came to America, I saw a documentary about it was about transgender, and he was turning into a she and going on hormones to help with the transition.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that got me interested in looking up effects of hormones, side effects, and all that. So I did a bit of research on hormones, and I realized no way I would ever go on any hormones. I would try to find alternatives if I can before I go to that. So when I found out the all birth control pills and the Minora Nivara injections, all that was hormones, I was in shock, Lisa. I was literally in shock. I don't know how I didn't know it was hormones, but I found out when I was 18 that birth control, most of them are hormones. I was in shock. I had to stop what I was doing, think about it. I could not believe it that a lot of people were okay with taking hormones every day, every 3 months when they're perfectly healthy. I could not believe that.
So
That's how I knew.
was it something in the research, or was it the fact that you could see how powerful hormones are? Was it
Yeah, from
something
the
about
research,
that?
I saw how powerful hormones are. It's like you alter whole system, not just one, a whole lot of other system. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting what you brought up about the documentary, because I had never really thought about it that way, but obviously hormones can impact a person's physical appearance, and when a person is transitioning from male to female or female to male, that's obviously one of the ways, uh, one of the
Yeah.
things that contributes to the physical transformation if they choose to
Hmm.
do that. And so that's an interesting point that you're making, because of how powerful hormones are, that they can and do have an impact on your body, whereas most people, because it's so common, most people don't really think about the fact that they do have an impact on your body. Most people don't even consider them to be medication.
Oh yeah, no, not after reading that. No, it became real. Yeah, so I knew right. I wasn't sexually active back then because I was 18, and I became sexually active at 22. So decided right then that's not for me. No way. And anyway, back then I was into healthy eating, healthy lifestyle, and all that. So I was like, what's the point if you're avoiding hormones for milk, meat, and then you're pumping yourself up? And people are on hormonal birth control for years and years, so there's always that. It's not like you're gonna be on it for like a month or something. It's like years and years of trying to avoid pregnancy. So, see, I can take Plan B if I mess up or something, because that's right then. I know it's right then, and then I'm off of it. But hormonal birth control, you continuously taking it. So it wasn't for me.
Well, I think that's a really good point that you're making as well, because when I was doing my training as a Justice Body Literacy Advocate, there were discussions about Plan B. Obviously, a lot of women who choose the fertility awareness method are choosing it either because they don't like hormones, maybe the hormones didn't agree with them, or even myself, I always had reservations about just like you said, the duration. So, as you said, it's one thing if you're taking it for a couple of months, but it's another thing if you're using it as a permanent, semi-permanent form of birth control where you may be using it for 10 years. So, for me, I also had reservations about that. And one of the things that would come up is how you can use Plan B if necessary. And also with fertility awareness, you would know if you messed up on your fertile day.
Yeah.
So you would actually know if
Yes,
that
you would.
mess up is consequential or inconsequential. So for me, pregnancy was not an option until it was. So when I was, say, in university, it was not an option. But if, for example, I was using a condom with a partner in my, just as, as a double up method or whatever it was, in my luteal phase, for example.
It failed.
For example, so the
Yes.
condom fails in my luteal phase after ovulation, after I've confirmed that I'm not fertile. Well, like it has the implication that I don't have to take Plan B, and I know that I don't have to take
Yeah.
Plan B because I can't get pregnant. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point you make, and also the fact that you're right, you're exposing your body to hormones just for that occasion. And so it doesn't have the same long-term impact of exposing your body to hormones every single day. So I think that's an excellent point that you made. So then how did you so you mentioned Kindara. So did you start using Kindara before you actually knew about fertility awareness?
No, I didn't even knew about Kindora until I started chatting. I started using Kindora about 6 months into fertility awareness, and that was because I was using paper chats. So I was making them myself. I hated it. I know most people love their paper chats, but Lisa, I hated the whole thing. I had to sit down, get a ruler, graph paper, put in the numbers. I did not enjoy any
Oh,
of
no,
that.
you didn't. You actually made it by hand. You are a trooper.
Yeah. I was living with my sisters back then, so I didn't have access to printers or whatever. I would have to go to the library to print out stuff, so it was much easier if I just make them myself. Oh, but I didn't talk about how I discovered.
Yeah, how did you first
fertility.
discover it?
Yeah, I discovered it around that time after withdrawal. When we were doing withdrawal, but there was still pressure to find something, long term. And one day I was just, there, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I look up a lot of crap on Google. What if I look up natural birth control and see if something comes up? And then the first thing that came up on the screen was Lady Comp. And it measures your body basal temperature and then determine if you're fertile or not, and gives you green lights or yellow or red. Yeah, but I was very skeptical about it. I didn't trust it. So I kept digging more into it, and then I would find people who've used it successfully and people who've used it and gotten pregnant. So back and forth, but what I realized is a lot of people who had used it successfully were mentioning Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Tony
Weschler.
I don't know how they have Weschler. And I was like, okay, you know what? If I'm gonna spend $300 some on this device, let me get the book first and see. So I borrowed Taking Charge of Your Fertility from Michael local library and started reading. Lisa, I was blown away. I never looked back with the lady comp that was closed. I dodged a bullet and I started chatting right away. I kept calling my husband. I kept telling him, "Oh my God, this is so awesome. You just check your cervical mucus, you take your body temperature, and you can determine fertility." And I was so happy, Lisa. And then in the book, it recommended to chat for about 3 cycles before you start using it for birth control. So I started chatting. My first chat, I see ovulation, everything working out. Oh, cervical mucus was a bit complicated, so I kind of let it go. But the temperatures always shifted after I observed some sort of acquired cervical mucus. So the first chart, I went into my second chart, and it was all perfect. And I started practicing. The first time I did go unprotected, though, I was a nervous wreck. I mean, the whole time I was practicing, everything was making sense, everything was awesome. But when I did go unprotected, that was something else. But the 14 days went by miserably, and my period showed up on time like I had predicted, and that put a whole weight off of me. And it took about 2 more cycles for me to be comfortable and not anxiously wait for my period. So that was awesome. So after that, it was on to fertility awareness.
Well, I think that's so interesting. And I think a lot of women who are learning the fertility awareness method can echo that sentiment because of the, for lack of a better word, indoctrination that we all receive about our fertility from a young age. Because we're all really told that we're fertile all the time. And it comes with a lot of fear because we're not taught to understand our bodies. So we don't really know why we're fertile all the time, right? Because they show us the egg and the sperm meeting. So they show us that part, but they don't talk about cervical mucus and the role that it plays in pregnancy and fertility. And so they just tell us that we're fertile all the time with leaving out 98% of the information. And so your story is really interesting because even though you read the books, even though you knew logically and scientifically what was going on and why pregnancy wasn't possible during the time that you were having unprotected sex, it still took quite a while for you to actually get there and actually believe it.
Yeah. Quite a while. I was actually surprised after the first time I went unprotected. I was so surprised that I freaked out. I thought I was ready because, my chats were perfect and everything. And then I was freaking out. But anyway, I got over that within 3 cycles, thankfully. But once I got comfortable with fertility awareness, oh, my husband and I fell in love with our methods of birth control. We use fertility awareness and withdraw during fertile times. Perfect. Everything worked out. It's like a whole beginning of our chapter together, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you found fertility awareness after you found withdrawal, and so for you and your husband, you use withdrawal during your fertile window, and that has been effective for you, and you've never had a pregnancy scare or anything like that. So that's interesting. Speaks to withdrawal being 94% effective with perfect use. And I always have to say that perfect use is possible with any method. It's possible to use condoms perfectly. It's possible to use withdrawal perfectly. And it's possible to use fertility awareness perfectly. Of course, that doesn't guarantee that you won't get pregnant because there is no guarantee. Even fertility awareness method it's still
I think that's kind of
99.4%
high. It's
effective.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
So fertility awareness with perfect use, and perfect use would imply some sort of abstinence. That's what the perfect use is based on. Of course,
yeah.
I don't advocate for anything. I say do whatever you're comfortable with during your fertile window. But the statistic of
Because we were,
99.4% comes from the
yeah,
abstaining during that time. Yeah.
yeah, and we were already using withdraw, so it was already working for us. So to us, it was we already had a barrier method when, well, not really barrier method, but we already had a method to use during my fertile window. We just had to figure out, when to go unprotected. That's how it was for us.
Yeah. And how did you find that using the fertility awareness method impacted your relationship with your husband? Do you find that it had any impact on the way that you communicated or related to each other or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, fertility awareness did bring us closer. Because I used to talk a lot about hormonal birth control side effects, and he would realize if it was with another person, they might have gone that route, and if they wanted to conceive or whatever, they might have had issues. And he was as grateful as I was to discovering fertility awareness, and a lot of communication, is needed. So kind of that keeps us communicating all the time. When
Mm-hmm.
am I fertile? How is my cervical mucus? And I'll tell him, oh, it's egg white. You have to withdraw. So all that, yeah, kind of like opened up a really good communication and trust. If all those kind of pushed us together, and eventually we got married and all. Yeah, but yeah, it was a really major influence in what determined. Because when I ask my husband, one of the things he loves about me, and one of the unexpected things he found about me, he always mentions fertility awareness, withdrawal. He would have been stuck with condoms forever, and I was smart enough to look up options and find out if they work, and they did. So all that, I didn't really realize right away how appreciative he found it, but I later found out he did
Mm-hmm.
from conversation. Yeah, and he also loves how open we were about it.
Well,
Yeah.
so it sounds like you were able to quite easily learn the basics of the fertility awareness method from Tony Weschler's book, Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And you mentioned also that your cycles were perfect. So your cycles fit the description in the book. So in for any of the listeners who haven't had an opportunity to read Taking Charge of Your Fertility, you get a really clear sense of what your cycle, quote unquote, should look like when you read that book. It's true. You really get a sense of it. And then if your cycle doesn't look like that, then you really start to question. So I think that there's a couple things I find interesting. And so one of the things that I find interesting is because you were always opposed to hormonal birth control of any kind, that means that
Mhm.
you never actually took it. So even for me, even though I had my misgivings about using hormones forever, I still
Mhm.
did take hormonal contraceptives. My doctor put me on them at a young age because of my heavy, painful periods. And so I, I guess I didn't have virgin fertility. My fertility had been altered, right, for a period of time using the hormones. And I think it's interesting as well because so many women who find the fertility awareness method, their cycles aren't perfect. By the time they start charting, it's not as easy. So do you think
Yeah.
that if your cycles had been a bit different, do you think you might have had a more difficult time, or you might have had to actually seek help? Is this because it doesn't sound like you had to actually try to find help from a fertility awareness educator or any of that. How were you able to kind of fumble through the learning process?
I've actually thought about that, Lisa, and I really don't know because at the moment, I couldn't, I really could not afford a fertility or awareness instructor. I couldn't do it. But I believe I would have pursued it anyway. Because to me, like I told you, I had an aversion to hormonal birth control. That kind of had to push me for something.
Well, and so let's talk about the Facebook group. What inspired you to start your Facebook group?
Yeah, to be truthful, when I thought about the group, but I didn't know how, I was gonna get women to join it. But I was a regular member on Kindora's trying to avoid section, so I was on there and I already had a lot of family friends, so that kind of helped. So I kind of thought myself as a fertility awareness advocate. So I was like, you know what? Let me make a Facebook group and hopefully more people will get to learn about fertility awareness and they'll join. And I posted the group's website, Facebook website on my Kindora account so people can find it. And yeah, people did find it. And when more people found it, people who don't use Kindora also found it. So that was also my goal because I knew there was a lot of other group of women who used other apps, other websites. So, all those women who just use Facebook. So it was like a place for everybody who uses fertility awareness, who wants to learn how to use fertility awareness for birth control, to join so we can, learn from each other, share our experience, help those who are trying to learn the method, give them tips on what helped us the easiest, what was harder, stuff like that. And kind of the group got big, so it kind of became a community for fertility awareness, not just for those people who were trying to avoid pregnancy. But in the beginning, that was the goal. But in the end, it's everybody. It's a family of
Well, and
women.
I checked the group members a couple days ago before our interview, and you have about 1,300 members in your group. And so when you started the group, did you have any idea that it would get that big? And I mean, who knows how big it'll be in a couple months or a couple years, but did you have any idea how big it would get?
Nope. My goal is to get 100 members, and even that, I had no idea how I was gonna do it. I started out adding all my female friends to the group and my Kindora friends to the group. Yeah, but I had no idea it would get this big. I think about it sometime and I'm like, wow.
Well, I think that speaks to the fact that a lot of women do want to have options. I always say on the show that the fertility awareness method is absolutely not for everybody. Everybody is not interested in learning how to chart their cycles and checking cervical mucus. There are women who are opposed to that, and we're all different, and that's why we have all these options. That's the cool thing. But the unfortunate thing about the fertility awareness method is it's often not presented as an actual, viable, reliable option for women to use and to be able to feel confident in using it for birth control. And you mentioned that you started the group about 9 months ago. And so within a short period of time, your group has a huge amount of membership. And it really speaks to the number of women who are looking for non-hormonal, reliable, effective methods of birth control. There's so many women who want it. So even though this method isn't for everybody, if 5% of all women use this method, that would be a massive number of women. So
that is true.
Yeah. So I think that it speaks to just it's this universal thing that happens to women when we learn about the fertility awareness method. We all want to share it, and I think that
share it.
Yes, and I think women learn best from other women in a supportive environment. And I've said
Yes.
before on the podcast that when I learned to use the fertility awareness method, I actually learned among a group of women, some who were fertility awareness educators, some who were just starting to chart like I was and kind of learning along the way. But that was, I mean, learning in that type of environment is ideal. I was able to learn around women who, some of whom had actually been formally trained, and others who were just charting, and that really gives you the opportunity to learn the method and be, give support. So did you find that the group gave you the support that you needed or that you were looking for?
Yes, it did. Yes, some of the administrators of the group, especially Anika Riddle, she has used the natural birth control for 7 years now. I met her on Kindora actually. She was one of the first people I added. It worked for her for all those years, and I felt like a lonely fish in the sea when I was learning fertility awareness. I didn't know anybody who did it. I had never spoke to anybody who did, so I was just going by the book. So that's another reason why that got me, to think about creating a Facebook group. So people who are starting out can get an opportunity to talk to people who are already doing it, because that is important. Remember when I told you that I kind of freaked out? If I had spoken to somebody who had practiced fertility awareness, I would not have freaked out going unprotected the first time. I wouldn't have. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Now,
sense, because then you be able to speak to someone who's been there and done it, and it helps you to gain that confidence that the method would actually work.
yeah, so that was the reason for the group, so we can get together and help people who are beginning out, especially for people to know it's really a working method. It works. People can use it effectively. So if somebody joins the group and we share chats and they look at the chats and we're talking about it like it's no big deal. You chat your fertility signs and you can determine fertility. That sort of things, to help other people to have confidence in fertility awareness, pretty much for people not to go through what we went through. Like, for example, another administrator of the group, Nicola Susanna, she was on hormonal birth control for over 20 years. And, she feels guilty about it. So she doesn't want other people to be on hormonal birth control like she was, thinking there was no other options. So she's always able to jump in whenever somebody needs help about it, because like I said, it's a group of people who are really dedicated to get the message out to other women that this is the real thing, and we use it so we can be first-hand testimony that it works. So that's really the whole point for the group and for support, because sometimes you just want to share with people who know what you're sharing. So that's another thing. It's a great place for people who know fertility awareness to talk about anything.
And because I think it's great, and I think that it's important, for just like you said, for women to have access to other women who have been using it, to meet other women who are really doing it, and to be able to ask questions. But one of the things as well is that if someone joins the group and they don't know much about fertility awareness, what advice would you give to them? Because I know that when you have that many people part of a group, some of them know a lot about fertility awareness and some of them don't. And there can be some, when it comes to using the method accurately, some of the things that I read sometimes are scary. Like when people say, oh, my mucus is less fertile today. I had sex with my partner. Should I be worried about pregnancy?
Yeah.
And then for me, as someone who has taken a degree of training in fertility awareness, I think to myself, there's no such thing as less fertile or more fertile. You are either fertile or you're not. And I just want to go into their computer and be like, no, stop. So what advice would you give to women who are just starting to learn the method when they come to the group?
Lisa, there's a lot of people who use fertility awareness from all around the world. But it's like I said, it's a group of people who sharing their experiences. So, but most of the time when somebody joins the group and they say they need help, we always tell them there are two options. You can either self-teach with a book, or you can do it with an instructor. We
Mm-hmm.
always tell people that, and we also, and our community guidelines state that we're not, fertility awareness certified or whatever. Yeah, so to do your research, so it's up to people to do their research, but we try to give as accurate information as we can.
Yeah, no,
That
absolutely. And
with
there's
experience.
there's a lot of educators who jump in and those types of things. And the thing about fertility awareness is it really is up to you. It's up to each person to learn the method, to learn it accurately, however is the best way for them to learn it. So some women are fortunate, like you are, to have cycles that are because if a woman has menstrual cycles that are fairly normal, that fall within the range of normal, and if you read Toni Weschler's book, if you have a menstrual cycle where you have cervical mucus, when you're supposed to, and your cycles are not extra long or extra short or anything, if they just kind of happen to fall within the normal range, then it's really easy to figure it all out.
Yeah, that is true. Yes.
But then for women whose cycles don't fit into that pattern, that's more of when you actually need to seek out a bit of support, because you can still chart your menstrual cycles if they're not perfect, quote unquote. But it's a little bit more difficult to learn the nuances of how to chart a cycle that might be off the beaten path, so to speak.
Okay. That is true.
Mhm.
We just try to share our experiences, and hopefully it helps again, if somebody's not understanding the message, we always say, you know, there's always that plan, but some people can't afford it though,
Yeah.
so some people it's not an option.
Mhm. Yeah. Maybe one day it'll be
But
covered by
people,
insurance.
hopefully, oh, that would be awesome, because I'll totally get a lesson.
Well, because if
Oh,
you
you
think
know
about
what?
it,
Let's work on that.
yeah. Well, because if you think about it, the birth control pill is expensive too, and when you're
With
on
them.
the pill or the
Oh,
patch or the ring or the shot or the implant or whatever, you're taking it for a significant amount of time, 5, 10, 15 years. And so that adds up too.
yeah.
Well,
But all
so
in all, it's worth it though. If you can afford it, it's absolutely worth it.
yes, absolutely. Well, so to wrap up today, I have a couple of questions for you. What would you say is the biggest myth about the fertility awareness method?
Well, the biggest myth would be people always mistake for the rhythm, which is not rhythm. This is a very effective method of birth control if learned properly. If you learn it properly, you can use it to avoid pregnancy for years to come. As I can, Simone, I've used it for almost 3 years now. Perfect use.
Mm-hmm.
And fertility awareness is a method that requires you to learn your fertility signs. As long as you learn that pretty good and you can interpret and observe your cervical mucus or your body temperature accurately, you can avoid pregnancy with that information for the rest of your life. I plan on using fertility awareness till the day I die. My husband is not interested in any permanent birth control options like vasectomy, and I'm definitely not interested in tubal ligation or hysterectomy. So we're going to be using fertility awareness for the rest of our lives because, first of all, we love it, it works, and we are simply satisfied fertility awareness customers.
That's awesome.
Yes, we are. That is true. Yeah, but that's it, Lisa. We really love it. I try to tell people I know about fertility awareness as much as I can. Yep, and hopefully one of these days, one of them will call me, Lisa, one of these days.
Yes, and ask you about it. Well, the thing is that of course, when you use a method and you're happy with it, you can't always go out and, you should use this method because that doesn't work. And that's really not what it's about, to tell people what they should do. Because if someone had told me what to do, I wouldn't have listened to them at all. But I think the interesting thing is that when you live your life in aligned with your values. So if you have a personal issue with the hormones in the birth control pill and you choose not to use them, when when women in your life find out that you're not using hormones and they talk to you about it, because of course, if they find out you're not using hormones and they find out that you're not using condoms, then they might start to wonder and ask questions. And you'll find, and I'm sure you have found, that sometimes people out of the blue will come to you and just ask you, so remember that fertility awareness thing you were telling me about? How does that work exactly? And that's what I find to be interesting. So just by living your life, it's kind of like that quote by Gandhi, to be the change that you want to see in the world. Just by living your life in a way that aligns with your values, you do end up influencing the way that people think, just by showing them that there are different ways to do the same thing. There's a multitude of ways to prevent pregnancy, right? And this is one of them, and it's really effective, and there's no side effects because there's no hormones and condoms don't work for everybody. You had mentioned they didn't work for your husband.
It was, it didn't work out for us. That was our plan, but it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and condoms didn't work for my husband and myself either. They worked for a period of time, but then it just wasn't comfortable. It wasn't, we tried different types just like you did. I went online, did my research. I tried to find all different types. And so everyone is different. And that's why you need to have these different types of options so that you can actually find out what works best for you. And
because I remember one time somebody asked me, why would you use a method like withdrawal for birth control? I'm like, if I told you the story, you will understand why. And they're like, okay, tell me. And I told them the story, and they're like, wow, I never even knew that.
Well, yeah, no, I think it's so interesting. And I think the focus on hormonal birth control, I've said this before on the podcast, but I think the focus on hormonal birth control, there seems to not be a discussion of STIs. So for people who are having sexual partners, it's like, oh, I'm on birth control, everything's good. But condoms are still a thing, and they're effective, and they're one of the few ways to prevent STIs. So I don't know why condoms are off the table, but we should always talk about condoms in conversations about birth control and safe sex, as far as that's concerned as well. So the final question I have for you, what advice, if any, would you give to someone who's contemplating coming off hormonal contraceptives, thinking about fertility awareness, on the fence, maybe not sure if they can trust it? What advice would you give to that person?
I would tell them to get off hormonal birth control as soon as possible. I know that kind of sounds a bit harsh, but you would be doing your body a great service. Maybe not right now, you don't see it, but in the future, you will. Because you will be giving your body an opportunity to work naturally. And if you're somebody who into how things work natural, definitely go for it. You will appreciate that, really appreciate it, because that's one of the things I love about fertility awareness. It's like you are working with your body, not against it or mimicking anything. You're just working in harmony with your body. So if you're somebody who's like that, with that kind of goal, go for it. Quit hormonal birth control and start chatting as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree, because when a woman is contemplating coming off of it, she's contemplating it for a reason. I think, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, your only concept of birth control options when you were looking for options when you became sexually active were condoms, the IUD, and hormones. Those were it. That was all that was on the table. And that's, for a lot of people, that's really the only options that we're made aware of.
Yeah.
And so I think that, but I also think that when a woman is contemplating coming off the pill, everyone I feel has that knowing, especially women have that intuition. So on some level, we know that you just kind of know. I think that I don't know how to put. I'm not saying it very succinctly here, but on some level, many women find that they just feel like they should come off of it. There comes a point where they feel like they know they should stop taking it, but they're not going to stop taking it because they really feel like that's the only option. So, because I've had many conversations with girlfriends where it's like that, where it's like, I know I should come off of it. So you have that knowing, that kind of internal guidance system that's kind of saying, you might want to stop taking the hormones, but you feel trapped. You feel like that's it. That's my only option.
No option. Yeah, the other reason for the group, and why so much support for the documentary, the sweetening the pill documentary. It's going to get the message out. I'm thankful that the Facebook group became successful because people find out about it. Also grateful for apps like Kindora because people use it for tracking their period, but it has like a community for people who use the method for conceiving or birth control. So when they go on there, they can hear people who are using it for birth control, and then they're like, wow, there is something I didn't know you could even use this for birth control. And they discover birth control like that. So really grateful for everybody who's putting awareness out there that there's another option that really works when you learn it properly.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that I have this feeling, and it's not just a feeling, you can see it, that more and more women are learning about fertility awareness because of Kindara,
Yes,
because
they
of the
get
movie. The movie is going to be huge, the Sweetening the Pill documentary, because it's really going to open a lot of people's eyes, not just women either, men and women, because there's a lot of men out there that aren't cool with the hormones because they have concerns about what it could do to your body. There's a lot of people in general that are just concerned, but they just feel as though that's their only option. And it's
and they
time
want
that the conversation starts regarding
gets
the effectiveness of fertility awareness.
yeah.
It's
Because even when they talk about it, they talk about it like a method that's not effective, like the rhythm. That's not getting people want to chat. So hopefully, it's gonna be talked about the real way. It's real, it works, it's effective. That's what we're aiming for. That's the reason for the Facebook group, for Kindora, for Sweetening the Pill documentary, and for Fertility Friday.
yes, absolutely. Well, that's obviously what I'm about. Just to put the accurate information out there about fertility awareness, so that it's my way in a sense of giving back, because I feel that I am really fortunate to be able to take this knowledge for granted. I've known about it for so long. I've been charting my cycles for 13 years now. And the only time I've ever had pregnancy was exactly when my husband and I were trying to get pregnant. And the fertility, so basically for those 13 years, I was using it for birth control successfully, along with barrier methods during my fertile window, etc. But using it successfully the whole time without ever having any type of...
That is amazing. 13 years. I can't wait for 13 years.
Well, I was a little bit younger than you were when you discovered it. So I discovered the fertility awareness method around age 19 or so. And it's so funny because I had been on the pill for pain and all that, but I never trusted the pill because since I was not on it for birth control, I would not take it at the same time. And I just knew that I could never feel confident. I'm not that type of person that could be taking this thing at the same time every day, to get up at the same time every day and all that kind of stuff. With fertility awareness, I chart my cycles, I take my temperature, I make note if I get up later one morning or what have you. And after having that experience, I can interpret my chart and really determine when I'm fertile and when I'm not. With the pill, I would have no idea what was going on in my body.
Yeah, that's the great thing about fertility awareness. You have an idea, all that. Yeah, that's great. That's what we're aiming for.
Yes. Well, Aisha, thank you so much for being here today and for coming on the show. It was great chatting with you and hearing about your experience with fertility awareness. I think that a lot of women can relate to your story, and I think that it also gives, part of the reason why I like doing episodes, kind of like the real woman episode of what your experience has been like, to show women that it's possible to use it successfully, and to show women how positive of an impact it can have on your life and on your relationship, and just having that confidence and knowledge about your own body. I think that it's you sign up for this as birth control, but you end up getting a lot more out of it than you thought you would.
So true.
Well, I'll make sure to link to the Facebook group in the show notes for today's episode. So yeah, thanks again, Aisha. It was great chatting with you.
Oh, nice talking to you, Lisa.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You can find me on Twitter at Fertile Friday, or stop by the blog and leave a comment in the show notes for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/35. You can also find me on the Fertility Friday Facebook fan page, which is facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, please look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.